Thanks for clicking through to Chamber Chat. These are one-on-one interviews with business and political leaders in our community, and a political leader in our community that everybody knows is our member of the provincial legislature and parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Transportation, right here, live. Well, not live for you, you're watching this on tape, but
Certainly
live for me, yes.
Which is a good
Kathryn McGarry, how are you?
I'm great, Greg. Thanks for having me.
It's so nice to
again.
have you here. Rather than it be a election contest, it's nice to have a chat about
It is.
what's going on.
And we've got a lot to talk about. We've
do.
already been talking about it.
Because before we get to it, but because it's my favorite subject that you're in charge of with the Ministry of Transportation, but I want to save that for a little bit. But let's first talk about some new initiatives that are coming up. The budget is coming down, so
Yeah.
obviously you can't talk a lot about that. But contained in the budget are some new initiatives that selling beer in grocery stores. It's what a lot of the public has been asking for. They
It has been.
like it to go to confectionery stores, but you know, you got to crawl before you run.
I think there's been it's one of the things that we ran on in the June election, and unlocking the assets in Ontario to work for the people. One of the big issues was beer stores and the monopoly that they've had to date. As we well know, and I'm sure you know, there's a lot of new craft brewers in Ontario, and hops are coming back to be grown in Ontario that are now starting to supply our local craft brewers. We're of course very proud of Grand River Brewing here.
Absolutely.
And I know that they're receiving a new canning line very shortly,
Yeah.
so that they will be increasing their production there.
They've done a great job. That's a real neat success story in Cambridge.
It is that, you know, we had Ontario Craft Brewer Day at the legislature a couple of weeks ago, and you can darn well bet that it was one of the favorite events of the year. It was very well attended.
I'm sure it was.
But we had a voting card, and Grand River Brewing was there front and center, and they brought a product for every one of the categories. So I was very proud,
Wow.
and it was actually my favorite.
Yes.
And they did very well in the in sort of the scorecards. I never got the final notes yet from it, but I know the President and CEO Bob Hannenberg was very happy with that day. So this is very good news for him, the new way we're going to be marketing beer. I think one of the complaints of the small brewers has been that they've not had any shelf space, and with the big three sort of monopolizing the beer store till now, they've had about 7% of shelf space to be able to sell their wares, and for the consumer experience, they've not been aware of the number of products that are out there. They would like the bigger choice. We've heard that loud and clear in many consultations that we've had across the province. So I think this for the consumer and the consumer experience is going to be great. What they are going to be looking at now is redesigning some of the actual beer stores so that it's more open shelf, open space, so a lot more of the wares can be shown. And the craft beer space is going up to 20%. That's almost triple the amount of space that they have right now.
That's wonderful.
It is. Now, in grocery stores, we're looking at phasing that in over a few years, up to, I think, 450 grocery stores that will carry a 6-pack of beer will be the maximum that's been sold. And, you know, you hear some concerns about that, but, you know, I have to point out that the small agency stores are already selling beer and wine in grocery stores. And I'll give you an example. The Foodland in Ayr. They're an agency store, so they've been selling beer and wine and spirits store for years there. This is a responsible way to bring it forward, so we will be putting it in with the same kind of issues that we've had to deal with the wine stores that are in the stores.
We have a cottage up at Conestoga Lake, and of course we go into Drayton to shop, and they have a grocery store there that has, well, I always call it the liquor store. It's kind of attached to it. It's a
and
separate
food store too.
Yeah, it's a great food store. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a big beer drinker, but you know, and I don't like really dark beer. Some people like that really dark beer. I like the lighter beer that Grand River Brewing does. And I really like, if I'm going to drink beer, I would think, you know, like from my perspective, I really like to try craft beer. I really like, you know, I like that. It's, you know, the same old big brewery thing doesn't do much for me. But,
Well, we heard loud and clear, as I said, from consumers that they really wanted to have a better experience in terms of purchasing their products, but they also want that variety. This
Yeah.
gives them the ability to see it, and I think that with the craft brewing industry here in Ontario, and those that are starting to grow hops in the
Yeah.
area, Collingwood's a big
Yes, that's right.
a big success in terms of growing hops. Think of the jobs that are coming
Oh, I
out
know.
of this, right?
It's-
you know,
it's
just
a-
from
it's
the
a-
farming industry
Yes.
to the brewers to selling the
It could be
beer.
easily identified as a small business initiative, because that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're doing, is giving more opportunity for small business.
Yep.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're
it's gonna be great.
we're very excited about that, and I think that people will understand as we move forward that this is a good thing
Mm-hmm.
for consumers.
So another thing identified in the budget will probably be the potential sale or consideration of the sale of Hydro One, or will that be further down the road?
Well, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday that Mr. Ed Clark, who
Mm-hmm.
has been leading a panel of experts for the province to unlock the value of the assets and
Mm-hmm.
to sort of look at how we can get the assets that Ontario owns working for the people, so that we can make those strategic investments in transit. I think that anybody that lives around the GTHA knows that transit and transportation are huge issues on the map. So in order to be able to move forward with a lot of the big projects, we need to be able to find some revenue sources. I know that what Mr. Clark talked about yesterday was selling off some of the assets in Hydro One. We will retain 40% ownership, and it'll be responsibly done so that the Ontario government still has a say on
So there'll be
everything to do with it.
regulations in places
A lot more.
yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the fear that people have had is that I know that in the previous government, the 407 was sold off, and Ontario was not able to realize the billions of dollars since that we could have had it been structured in the same way that Mr. Ed Clark has suggested that we structure the Hydro One sale going forward.
You know, I guess to some degree I'm of two minds. You read the articles, and obviously the media just loves to beat up on things like this. But I'm a little bit of two minds, because I remember, and you do too, I'm not pointing to your age, Kathryn, but
I'm sure of it.
but I remember when it used to cost me 25 cents a minute to phone Hamilton, because it was a monopoly, because it was held, mostly by government chains. And now I can actually phone the 905 for nothing. And
Galt to Kitchener.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
I first moved to Cambridge, Galt to Kitchener was long distance. So
and
there are
really
some-
the sale or the privatization of the telephone industry has really led to that, because once you start to get competition in the marketplace, then it drives prices down.
and it
That's what it's done.
deregulated at about the right time where we needed more choice. If you look at the technology that we've got now from the early 90s, the internet, smartphones,
Yeah.
we needed that deregulation to be able to provide those consumers with a whole
Can you
lot
imagine
more.
if it wasn't?
No, actually.
Well, I
I would
would-
have to sell my house right
Yeah.
now for my phone bill.
I
I can tell you that.
I know.
But
so, I
It
guess.
was good for the consumer,
yeah.
is bottom line. And I
And
think
and
that
hopefully that's, not just, freeing up some of the assets that are held there to help the government with some of their initiatives. I hope in the end of the day, the concentration is also to look at how can this help the consumer down the road. And, I guess, to some degree, we concern ourselves, we got to protect ourselves, that we don't give a monopoly to private enterprise, because a monopoly to private enterprise doesn't necessarily lead to consumer benefits. But, if we can open that door a little bit and start down that path.
And I think that's really along the line that Mr. Clark has looked at it. He's certainly got all the credentials. He developed a team, an expert team, to be able to weigh in on every single piece of their decision making. And they have looked at trying to get this responsibly out there so that we can have the revenue stream to make those important investments in transit, and B, to be able to retain control so that we as Ontarians can be assured and confident that the right things are being done. And as we know, everybody's asking about hydro prices, and that is certainly managed not by the government, but the Ontario Energy Board. And they've taken all those considerations under advisement while they were rolling this out. And I think it was just released yesterday, and I think as it becomes clear and we've got the budget coming down on Thursday, then I think that the people of Ontario will have a better chance to look at what this means and to get the right information in front of them. We've always talked about the media, and you know, sometimes not all the right facts.
Well, it's about the sound
context
bites, you know,
that
and
comes out
you
there,
can't
right?
choose which sound bites that they pick. And
I've noticed that. Have you noticed that?
I've noticed that for a long time.
I
But
know you have,
but you know, it's I guess, you know, it's their job, I guess, to scrutinize to some degree. But and that's what keeps everything in check and balance. You know, you got to have that differing opinion. But
And the check and balance is what I'm confident in terms of the upcoming budget, that we'll be looking to make sure that we still are investing in the important public services that Ontarians want and need. And our path to balance is still laid out to be at balance at 2017 and 18. But we've also been working on an awful lot more, and I wanted to bring this topic around to Bill 31, which is the Making Ontario's Roads Safer Act. You and I were talking about it. This is a combination, Bill 31, of two pieces of legislation that died on the order paper when the election was called in June. So the government recognized that a lot of the components of this bill were very important to bring forward. So they combined them so that we could get them in priority and out there. So this Bill 31 was announced on October 21st, and it's gone through first reading and second reading and through committee. Because it's actually part of my mandate letter as PA to Transportation, I took it through committee, and we have just known now that it's being called on Monday for third reading in the House. Now, what's important for the municipality is, number one, there are about $39 million worth of unpaid fines for the municipalities for traffic infractions. And this is going to be addressed in the legislation in Bill 31. It's essential that we get this bill passed quickly. I certainly heard at AMO, the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario, there's a lot of interest in bringing this bill forward so that the municipalities can then collect on the unpaid fines. And so there's a mechanism within the legislation here that will allow the municipalities to do that, and sooner rather than later. Everybody's looking for that. The other component of the bill is road safety. And there's a lot of different components to that. We've got a lot of measures that are protecting cyclists, pedestrians. We're addressing drug-impaired driving, distracted driving, which has been a really major issue, not only with our police services and enforcement officers, but also with the insurance industry. Do you know, Greg, that distracted driving is just passing the number of deaths on our roads that used to be attributed to alcohol impaired driving?
Wow. Yeah.
So that was the number one killer, alcohol impaired, and now we're switching to distracted driving. And I've had quite a lot of conversations. We had public consultations come in to talk to us while we had the bill in committee, and person after person just said distracted driving is going to be our number one killer. We have to get control of it. It's causing carnage on our highways, huge amounts of insurance claims, and destroying lives, and we have to get a handle on it. So I'm very excited to see that one going.
There's no question about that. I know the smartest move that I ever made was going to a device that doesn't have a real keyboard, it has a virtual keyboard, because it's difficult to use in a car anyway. And so I'm happy to get in the car and get away from my device now.
You heard that. You heard that.
Yeah.
And actually, we had a couple of people come forward in the public consultations, and I've had conversations with others that feel that the cell phone should actually go in the trunk, and that you should have a fine if it's in the cell of the car.
That's interesting.
And I think we certainly haven't gone that route yet. Certainly, my two sons have just recently gotten their G2, just so you know. good, safe drivers. And recently we pulled up in somebody's driveway, car still on, and one of my sons took his cell phone to look at it. I said, nope, can't do that. He says, but I'm stopped and parked in a driveway. I said, the engine's on.
Yeah.
Period. And he goes, oh, turn the car off. And
Exactly.
did not touch his cell phone. I said, never look at your cell phone in the car. Just get into that habit. And certainly with Bill 31, it means that distracted driving for the graduated licensee
Yes.
is going to have the same restrictions as
Alcohol,
alcohol
yeah.
impaired driving. So
That's a
same
good idea,
infractions.
yeah.
And certainly the fines and the demerit points have gone up for distracted driving. So the new fine's going to be $300 to $1,000 and 3 demerit points.
I have a good friend of mine, actually a chamber member, who is an absolute master at using the voice controls on his device to be able to send text messages, emails, doesn't matter what it is. He uses his device by voice as soon as he's in the car. So it's absolutely, everything is controlled by his voice. Whether he wants to make a phone call, whether he wants to send a message, he can do that while he's concentrating on the road and driving, and never has to grab his device. So, I think technology is going to take us down that path too, where it's going to help to eliminate that. We need to encourage that technology to come along so that we can jump in our car and speak to it, which all cars have that virtually now, where you jump in and
you can add your Bluetooth device into the car. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can activate all of some of the essential programs like texting in your car, so you can access that and send messages if you want by voice. So I played with it a little bit. It's just it's a little bit over my head, but this new technology you're working on, I'm really excited about.
It seems to be the
Oh my
topic
gosh,
that
Kathryn, I
everybody
want to
sort of
tell you,
jumps on.
I am all over this like you would not believe, like bark on a tree.
Okay, so you better tell the viewers what
I know.
it is. I'll let you
Autonomous
pronounce it.
vehicles, my wife complains to me all the time that I don't, when I'm driving her vehicle, apparently I'm not as good a driver as I should be. She thinks I'm a terrible driver,
that's
but things only happen when she's in the car, and I don't understand that. So
Karma.
the sooner I can get an autonomous vehicle, the better my marriage is going to be.
I'm sure my husband would probably agree with Lisa as well. Autonomous vehicles is kind of the new hot topic, and certainly when my mandate letter came out, first time actually to Parliamentary Assistants did mandate letters come out. And I had 4 major issues that I'm dealing with in my ministry. But the one issue that the press really picked up on was autonomous or self-driving vehicles.
Yep.
So I know that we were talking originally that it's 4 different levels. So there's 4 different levels of technology that a full autonomous vehicle can raise to. So the first 1 and 2 levels we're already at. So this is your eyesight assist, for instance, in the new Subaru that will sound an alarm if you wander out of your lane. It's the car that on cruise control now you can take your hands off the wheel for a time.
Or automatic braking because of
Precisely.
Yep.
Or backing up and having the cameras there. So that's the first 1 or 2 levels. The full autonomous vehicles and certainly the capability is going to be out there in prescribed conditions on a car that could probably drive without a steering wheel, brake. Can you even imagine you could sit sideways and talk to your passengers around
be in the
here?
back seat sleeping.
Well, exactly. So whether we're going to get to that or not,
We
or
will.
use that
We
kind
will.
of thing is another thing, because then you're looking at a number of different issues. So I know the technology is coming. I know that all the major car manufacturers are doing R&D on looking at this technology. We do have a company right in Waterloo that's already working on some of the robotics and some of the different electronic components that it takes to put in a vehicle to do it. Part of what we're missing out on at the moment is full legislation yet on how to even pilot these cars and what's it going to take from a legislation point of view as to how to deal with these cars on the road. So that is being worked on many jurisdictions, and we in Ontario are certainly working on it as well. We also recognize that you have to have legislation that is going to be compatible with your neighboring provinces and states.
Yes.
Recently, there was a fully autonomous vehicle that left California, and it drove to the border of Nevada without the driver
Without the driver?
touching the brake or the steering wheel. They had to have somebody in the vehicle.
Okay.
At the Nevada border, had to take off the plates, put on the Nevada plates, and drive in a different way, because there is differences in the legislation from the different jurisdictions of the two states. We don't want to get into that. We want to make sure that legislation that's developed here on Ontario to even pilot some of these vehicles on the road is compatible with all the other surrounding jurisdictions.
So some states say you have to have a licensed driver behind the wheel. Other states say you don't.
And I'm not sure where it's at, but I do know that there's not consistent legislation yet, because it's still a pretty new technology. It's an emerging technology, and something that I see as really exciting for Ontario.
I think so too. I think it's exciting for everybody.
We do. Well, I look at Ontario. We've got advanced manufacturers, right here in Cambridge, and we've had that manufacturing sector grow in about 4% in the last couple of years. Those are the types of emerging technologies that I think Ontario could really benefit from. We've got the IT sector. We've got a lot of the advanced manufacturing capability and skill sets right here. We've got auto manufacturers here that are already developing that R&D. We've got just so many of the components that we need to develop those vehicles right here in Ontario, and that's kind of where I see us going down the road.
15 or 16 years ago, I sat in a boardroom up in the region. We were talking about LRT, and I said, okay, fine, that's great, wonderful, but think down the road of the future. And I held up my BlackBerry at the time, and I said, how would that have changed our idea on communication technology if we knew this was coming 20 years earlier? So if we look 20 years down the road and realize that there's a good possibility when we come out in the morning to get in our car to go to work, we're going to be getting into a vehicle that's powered by something other than gasoline, and probably solar. We're going to be getting into a vehicle that has no steering wheel and just has a screen on the dashboard where you can log in where you want to go, and then bring up your newspaper in the morning and read it and drink your coffee and maybe even make your coffee, and then it'll drive you on to work. How are you going to get me then out of my car and into public transportation when that technology, and of course they all laughed 15 or 16 years ago, but we see that technology now coming very, very quickly. Battery-powered vehicles are
electric
really
vehicles are
popular. I've driven one. I can't believe them. As soon as they can get me one that I don't have to remember to plug in every night, every other night would be good, but I'm going to get one. They're wonderful. They make no noise. They're either on or off. It's so cool.
Climate change has been a big issue recently.
Yeah.
That certainly addresses some of our carbon footprint and certainly some of the reliance we've had on fossil fuels. And
I think that's all coming out, because I was a couple of weeks ago, I was up in the oil sands having probably the most educational tour I've ever had in my life, but you should go there sometime it's just amazing. But even those companies, Suncor and ConocoPhillips up there, are investing heavily in alternative energy solutions, because they know there's got to be an end to fossil fuels at some point down the road, or a mitigation of their use, and they still need to be energy providers in some fashion or another, and they're really investing heavily into that, and they see that far down the road. They see that far through the tunnel, where they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, where we are going to be not dependent on fossil fuels, but interdependent on fossil fuels, where they'll make up some supplement, but predominantly we'll be looking at renewable energy for everything.
Well, clean green technology is really where it's at, and it certainly has addressed some of our air pollution.
Yeah.
So we've reduced our healthcare costs. Reducing our reliance on fossil fuels for cars will certainly help our carbon footprint and ensure that we can get to where we need to be to preserve our climate. So there's a lot of emerging technologies. It's a very exciting time.
Well, and think about how autonomous vehicles will react. If you get onto it, I've always said, I've been a big believer, by 2025, you won't be able to get on a 400 series highway in Ontario without turning your vehicle onto autonomous control. And now you think of the 401 going into Toronto every single day if it was controlled environment. You know, the speed would be regulated, the carbon emissions would be regulated as a result of that. You know, and then you bring the electric vehicle into the equation, where when the traffic does slow down or stop, if it need be, that vehicle shuts off, you know, and there's no carbon footprint coming from it. It's just amazing.
Gridlock would cease to be.
I would think it would.
Recently, it took me 45 minutes, and I'm not kidding, to go from Queen's Park to the Royal York. It's a distance of about 1.5 kilometers. And a person in front of me had chosen to go into the intersection to try and make the light, so he sat there for 3 full lights.
Oh my goodness.
Total gridlock. Autonomous vehicles wouldn't be doing that.
No,
so
no.
It would resolve a lot of our issues.
Yeah.
So,
I'm excited about it. So push that legislation through and get me into my autonomous vehicle.
You'll be the first. I'm sure.
There's no question about it. Kathryn, it's been great. We you know, there are a few other elements that we could get into, but I think we should probably reserve that for another time. I'd like to, you know, when more clarity comes out about cap and trade, really the result on that, I'd love to sit down with you and talk about that, because, you know, there are some issues that either business isn't aware of or business needs to be aware of with respects to that. And also the ORPP at some point. You know, again, it's really in the making stages as well, and we really need to see where that's going as we get closer and closer and closer to that date. But it's been wonderful as usual to sit down with you and talk. I'm so excited about autonomous vehicles. And when you told me that you were in charge of that file, I thought, this is great. Like,
all right, well, I'll be after you too.
Oh yeah, I'll be. I was so envious when I was at these meetings in Phoenix here this past week. 2 of the individuals had said, yeah, they had the opportunity to ride in an autonomous vehicle, and I said, what? Like, that's my dream. And
I haven't
they said, it was the weirdest feeling, because you know, you like it like your heart starts to beat, because you're thinking, you know, who's got control of this? And this one gentleman was from Lubbock, Texas, and he's typical late 50s Texan. And they made him sit in the passenger seat. He didn't want to, but they made him sit in there because they don't want anybody shutting any of the controls off.
Yeah, there is a kill switch.
Yeah. So they want to keep somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. They want to keep them away from those controls. So they made him sit in the passenger seat, and he was just like, he says, for about the first 20 minutes, he says, I was just shaking like a leaf. But he said after a while, you thought, this is wonderful. Like, I feel perfectly safe. That's, you know, somebody that I don't see is, you know, kind of like God's hand around your car protecting you. But it's going to be exciting. We live in exciting times.
Well, I'll make sure that you're in on that ground.
I want to. As soon as you get to test drive one, make sure you give me a call, because I want to be there and be in it too.
It was
Thanks
lovely.
very much, Kathryn.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay.